Ciao a tutti, I'm Ivan. This is my Academy of Philosophy and Fine Arts. In this video, which is the second of the series of videos about the languages, I'm going to talk about the ideas. What is the idea of a language? What is a language as phenomenon of a, let's say, philosophical perspective, in the sense that I try to understand the mechanism behind it and share some ideas. So, first thing that I want to say is that learning a language is overall a wonderful experience, not just because it allows you to communicate with people, to be able to understand and so on, but it also allows you to develop more deeply your own personality, because being able to express in another language gives a certain development on your own personality. For example, the way I personally make jokes in a language changes from language to language. The way I approach a subject, the way I talk to people, it's very different. So I would have to say that speaking in a certain language, your personality becomes depending on the language that you're using. And this way, your way of expressing completely changes. And your ideas, your way of thinking, because the language works in a different way, your way of thinking it also changes accordingly to the language. This sense, you develop your personality. It's not like you turn into a different person, but you expand, you expand your own personality in a different domain, like from a different perspective. Now, the second point that I want to say is that this is an interesting phenomenon that you learn. The more you learn languages, the more you understand it. Languages have a certain predisposition to a certain domain of reality. This means that according to your own personality and the way you approach the language, you will open yourself more to a certain way of approaching life. For example, it's not casual that philosophy is it's not casual that philosophy as science was developed the most in ancient Greece and German. The greatest philosophers of all time come from these two lands, and it has to do with the language, so the ancient Greek and German, because these two languages have a certain predisposition to the thinking, to the rational thinking, to the constructing of the language. In these languages, you can create new ideas through the words. In German, for example, you are able to put together words and basically create them. And it's a very suitable language and flexible when you need to express certain abstract concepts. And it works the same for other languages. For example, Italian or French or Spanish, the Romantic languages, they are very suitable for poetry, for example, or literature, because the language it's not exactly precise, but it allows you the fact that it's not so precise and not rational like German, it allows you also to be able to be more flexible and to be able to express certain secondary aspects, something that you don't feel, that you don't perceive, but you can express through these languages. A certain atmosphere behind the phenomenon. And this is just another example, but the more you study the languages, the more you understand that based on their roots, they have a different approach and different development and relationship to different domains of science. Now, one last point that I wanted to point out about the languages, and I think it's also the most important one, it's the fact that a language, it's not an instrument, it's not a tool. This is a big misunderstanding that we have about the languages, we think that we use the language to communicate, to express things, to obtain things, to dominate things, the reality. And this is a big philosophical point in the history of humans, with the modern thinking, with Bacon, Descartes, Galileo. The language became assumed this role of a huge instrument that allows man to dominate the nature. For example, Galileo says that the language of the nature is written in mathematical characters, or that Bacon says that we need to dominate the nature. Man needs to dominate the nature. This is how it approaches. So behind these ideas on the way using language, it's not just like a superficial phenomenon. It's actually changes completely our way of approaching reality. And this is not how a language is supposed to be. It kind of reduces its nobility. The language comes before human. This is why it cannot be used by humans. And I don't mean like in a chronological sense. I mean more like in a grounding sense, that language is more fundamental. Language is a response that humans have to express themselves. So it's not that we use the language to express ourselves, but we need to correspond to what we see, to the reality, to the phenomenon that surround us. We need to respond to the wonder of life, and there comes the language as help to express ourselves, to elevate ourselves. And this is like the greatest part of language, I believe. It reveals the reality, and I think we all experience this very interesting phenomenon of saying the right word in the right moment. Sometimes we could have discussions for hours with someone without understanding each other. I'm talking about, or like a dialogue with someone in which we try actually to understand something together. It's already a precondition. Of course, it's not just like talking randomly with people, but in this condition, we could talk for hours, think like we didn't reach anything, and then at some point, one of the people, like a miracle, says a word that magically expresses exactly what the two people were thinking, and it just corresponds perfectly to the idea, to the reality, and everything just becomes magically so clear. And yeah, this is a great phenomenon, and I think another example of this where we can verify is we can see it in the poetry, especially I think in poetry. Poetry uses language, so to say, but it doesn't really use it as a tool, but more like as to create, to evoke things. A word in poetry is so fundamental that it just doesn't just communicate a thing, it creates things. It grounds things from nothing, and it opens the door for a future. This is the power of the word, and it's very explicitly used in this way in poetry. So this is what I had to say for the second video, and thank you for watching it. I'm Ivan. This is the Academy of Philosophy and Fine Arts.